Hello, beautiful community, and welcome to Rewilding Wellness. I am Dr. Christy Vanacore. This is a podcast, yes, but more than that, it's a community, a gathering place, and a movement. This is where we gather together to remember what it means to be well in body, mind, spirit, and soul. Here we talk about all things related to nervous systems and relationships, embodiment, relational healing. And we dive into the quiet spaces and places where healing actually happens beneath performance, beneath the pressure, beneath the conditioning of who we were taught to be. So these conversations are for all beings, women, men, children. This is for women reclaiming their softness and their sovereignty, men who are ready to restore strength without losing their heart, children to restore their essential aliveness, and anyone who is longing to live from a place of more truth, presence, and rhythm. I'm Dr. Christy, and this is your invitation to slow down, to come home to yourself, and remember what it means to be fully alive. That is Rewilding Wellness. So I'm thrilled to have you here. And today's episode is for the men and for the women who love them. This episode is for the men who are functioning, responsible, showing up, but quietly feel disconnected from themselves and their bodies and their sense of aliveness. And this episode is for the women who love these men, who find themselves confused or frustrated or longing for deeper connection without quite having the language for what's actually happening underneath the surface. Today's conversation is not going to be about blame, and it's certainly not going to be about fixing anyone, because it's not about who's doing it right or wrong. This conversation is about understanding. So we're going to talk about what many men are silently carrying, how chronic stress shapes the nervous system. We're going to talk about why connection and desire and presence begins to fade, and how disconnection shows up not always as collapse, but sometimes as endurance. We'll also explore the consequences of this disconnection in relationships, intimacy, and the loss of a man's inner compass, and why none of this is a personal failure. I'll say that this work matters so deeply to me, not only because I've worked with countless men in my practice for almost 3 decades, but because I'm raising 2 of them. And because this world we are shaping for men, women, and relationships needs more understanding, not more pressure, more presence. So as you listen today, I invite you to soften your shoulders, take a breath, and let this be a conversation that you don't have to brace yourself for. You do enough bracing. So let's dive in. So most men in the world right now are functioning, but they're not thriving. Okay, so most men, not all, but most men, when they come to me, they're not falling apart. They're actually super responsible. They're showing up. They're doing what needs to be done on a daily basis. And yet, underneath all of that competency and responsibility, there is this sense of disconnection. So men who come to see me like this, they will usually describe things like having constant tension in their body. They describe difficulty relaxing, even during what's supposed to be downtime. These men report having a diminished sense of desire and pleasure. They feel emotionally flattened or irritable or numb. And they have this overall sense of feeling like not quite there in their own lives. Now, none of this is an issue of motivation, and none of these things are character flaws. And for most men, this is not a hormonal imbalance, although that is often the case. But hormonal imbalances are not the root cause of the issue either. What we're really describing is nervous system problems. We're describing energetic static that creates interference in the system that then leads to the physical body being completely reorganized, leading to the mental overthinking and the psychological warfare, and then the relationship issues that follow. Okay, these are nervous system and bioenergetic issues. So most men today are living in constant states of physiological readiness. They are always anticipating responsibility and always bracing for what's next. Now, the human body was designed for short bursts of stress. Okay, stress is not the problem. You know, in our culture, we like to make everything about stress being a problem. But stress in and of itself is not the enemy, because we were designed to navigate short bursts of intense stress. But what we were built to have happen after that is recovery. Okay. And when stress becomes chronic, the system adapts. And this adaptation keeps men functioning. But it does so by narrowing down sensation and dulling pleasure and limiting their emotional range and capacity. And the cost of staying in this sort of operational place is their own aliveness, right? Going through the motions, oftentimes in a very robotic way. You're checking off all the boxes. You're getting all the things done. But you are draining your life force. You are disconnected from the essence of who you are, which is boundless joy and love. Now, another dimension of this problem is loneliness, although most men will rarely name it that. So this loneliness often wears the disguise of busyness, fatigue, or being quote unquote fine. Loneliness in men is usually this very quiet, responsible, and even invisible pattern. And if we look back for many men, most of them have learned from an early age to just be able to handle things yourself, right? To don't need too much. Don't be a burden. Stay strong, handle it, fix it. Don't be needy. So men adapt, right? Men adapt, and they can do it well for the most part. But what that then translates to as a man evolves and goes through his life, and this begins in childhood, friendships become activity-based. Connections become something you do and not something that you embody or rest in. And I see so many men numb themselves, not because they don't want connection, but because loneliness hurts and numbness is the only way they know how to survive. And yet, numbing slowly severs connection to the self, leaving men really lonely, whether they're single or they're partnered, whether they are alone or surrounded by crowds. Now, a common misconception is that there are some men who don't want to be in a relationship. But here's the thing. The majority of men actually do want to be in conscious relationships. Most men deeply desire this. But the truth is that a man's relationship with himself, his own body, his breath, his inner signaling, this is the foundation for every other relationship in his life. And almost no one ever taught men how to build that. And here's where so much misunderstanding often enters in. So men and women are wired very differently, such that men and women seek safety differently. So under stress, typically men tend to go inward. They get quiet. They become very focused. Whereas women, on the other hand, seek closeness. They want to process everything verbally. They seek reassurance. Now, add trauma to the mix for either partner, and these differences even intensify. Okay? So that proverbial expression of men and women being from different planets, well, it's not so far off, right? Because men and women are primarily wired for different purposes. So what they seek is different. Now, men, you guys out there, I know you hear this, what I'm about to say, all the time, because I, as a woman, have uttered these very words to men in my life. So men, you hear, you need to try harder. You're not trying hard enough. If you're out there listening to this, I know, I'm sure that resonates with you. But the truth is that effort is not the problem. Men don't need to try harder. They need to try differently. Connection doesn't return through pressure. It returns through safety for both men and women. So the issues that men experience with their own selves and in their relationships with the women in their lives, it's not a failure of desire or care. It's a mismatch of nervous system strategies. That's what relationship problems are really all about. Now, let's talk about the consequences of that. So this is the problem, right? So men are living in chronic nervous system pressure. Men are disconnected from their bodies. Men are carrying responsibility without adequate places to discharge the stress. Men are adapting to survive, yet they're slowly losing access to their aliveness and their pleasure and their presence, right? And like anything else, this has consequences. Because when this disconnection with self persists long enough, it doesn't stay contained. It now shows up everywhere. It trickles out of yourself and into every part of your life. And one of the places where it shows up for a man and a woman is in relationship, in particular, the sexual health of a relationship. Okay? So one of the first places that men notice the consequences of their being endlessly drained and losing their aliveness and their pleasure and their presence is with desire. Now, desire, this is not a moral thing. It's not a willpower issue. It's not an issue of attraction for the most part either. Desire is actually a nervous system state. So if a man's nervous system is chronically braced and in contraction, when it's living in pressure and vigilance and responsibility, the body prioritizes survival over pleasure every single time. Every single time. Because to the body, in order for pleasure to yield sex, right, or from a purely biological standpoint, the perpetuation of the species, there needs to be safety first. If your survival is threatened, your system is not going to let you stop to do anything. It's going to want you to keep moving to get to safety. So the body prioritizes survival over pleasure. So desire, though, it doesn't disappear, and nothing is wrong with a man, but it disappears because the system no longer feels safe enough to open. So I hear so many men say, I really want sex, but I don't feel it anymore. Or I feel so disconnected from my body. I have other men saying, it feels like effort instead of pleasureful, joyful and pleasuring. Sex becomes another demand, right? It's another place to perform. It's another arena where something is expected. I have so many men who come in and say the women in their lives just they want to be seen, they want to be chosen, they want to be desired, they want sex. But if a man feels like it's another demand and expectation that signals to their system that they don't feel safe, they're gonna hold back. And it's all for self-protection. So if you're a woman listening to this, in these situations, your man is not rejecting you, he's trying to protect himself. Okay, he's trying to protect himself. I have other men who tell me that they don't want to or feel they can't be intimate with their partner or significant other or any woman in their life. And so they reach to pornography because it's quick. It's sort of this naughty little secret thing that they can do. And when I say naughty secret, that's the narrative around it, right? That's not the truth of it. It becomes something that they can control instead of something that they're being asked to do and perform. It's a way that they can avoid intimacy while still activating their pleasure sensors, right? And still receiving that rush that comes with self-pleasure, right? This is all about protection. Now, let's talk about shutdown, because sometimes the system shuts down under pressure. Now, shutdown is not avoidance, and it's not indifference, and it's not lack of self-care. Shutdown happens when a person's nervous system reaches its capacity. So if there is too much input, too much demand, too much emotional intensity, the system does the only thing that it knows how to do to preserve itself. It goes quiet. It goes still. It goes inward. This is like the animal playing dead in the wild, right? Now, from the outside, when men do this, when men are in collapse and they go quiet and still and inward, the women in their lives think this seems like withdrawal and emotional absence and lack of responsiveness, and that they're checked out and that they don't care and that they don't love them anymore or they don't respect them anymore. But to the man on the inside, they are so overwhelmed. They have all this pressure and nowhere to put it. Now, for women, they're confused. They're overwhelmed. They don't know. And so what they do is strive for connection. They pressure even more. They push in even more. And all that does for a man is make him collapse even further. And this is the point where men are often told so often, explicitly and implicitly, you need to try harder. But the truth is that effort does not resolve the shutdown. Only safety can do that. And until the nervous system feels safe again, shutdown will continue to be the body's last line of defense. Okay? So it's important that men and women understand that this is what's going on. This is the root of so many of their conflicts. Now, I want to talk about how polarity erodes in relationships. So another consequence of a man's disconnection with himself is what we call the erosion of polarity. So polarity thrives on contrast. Its presence and receptivity, direction and flow, grounding and movement. Okay, so polarity, it's sort of that whole thing of opposites, right? So if a man is braced and contracted and pressured and disconnected from himself, his presence collapses. When a woman doesn't feel met or seen, her nervous system escalates in an attempt to restore connection. Okay. And yet polarity thrives on this contrast. Polarity can't survive in a system where there's nervous system dysregulation. So if the woman is not feeling seen or met and the man is feeling braced and pressured, now both partners are no longer available for one another. They're just reacting to one another. And in that space of reactivity, of chronic nervous system activation, desire, playfulness, romance, curiosity can't live. It is energetically impossible. And it's not because love is gone, but it's because safety and regulation are missing. Right? So when two dysregulated nervous systems are trying to love one another, there can be so much pain because there are two nervous systems trying to find safety in very different ways. Usually with one moving towards connection and the other moving towards, pushing away and inward containment. One needs words, the other needs quiet. One needs closeness, the other needs space. And without understanding what's happening behind the surface, both partners can feel really misunderstood and unseen and blamed. Do you know how many times I hear from men, no matter what I do, it's not enough? And I've heard this from men in my life. I've heard from men, I'm always getting it wrong. Nothing is ever right. Nothing is ever good enough. I can't seem to meet your needs. And that sense of failure only contracts the system even further. Okay? And this is why we need to understand what's happening, because when we understand the system, we stop personalizing what's really physiology. And it's only when we stop taking this personally that we know, that we see that repair can become possible. Now, I want to pause here for a moment and just make it clear that nothing that I've shared means that men are incapable of deep connection or intimacy or conscious relationships. No. But what it does mean is that many men have been operating from survival rather than regulation. And even though survival can get you through for a while, it cannot bring you home. It cannot bring you to your truth. It cannot be a foundation for your relationship with yourself as well as relationships with others. It can't be. Now, the good news is that nervous systems are plastic. So they can be shaped, they can learn, bodies can learn safety, and connection truly can be restored. And when that restoration begins, everything changes. And that's not because anyone's trying harder, but because the system finally has room to soften. So again, this conversation is not about fixing men. It's about restoring the original architecture of the masculine, where strength and sensitivity were never meant to be in opposition, and where presence and desire and connection arise naturally through embodiment. Okay. Another consequence of inner disconnection and chronic nervous system pressure that I want to focus on for a moment is when men lose access to what I call their inner compass. Okay, so the loss of a man's inner compass is huge. So many men don't just feel disconnected from pleasure or connection, they feel disconnected from themselves, from their intuition, from their sense of inner yes and no, from the feeling of being aligned with their own truth. You know, when I hear men say, I don't know what I want anymore, or, you know, I'm doing what needs to be done, but it just doesn't feel like me. I don't know what it is. Or when I hear men saying, I'm just living out of obligation, not choice. All of these things happen when men don't have access to their true self, their intuition, and their higher knowing. And that's because access to intuition and higher knowing requires a felt sense of security and safety in the body. Yes, safety. It all comes back to safety. So when a man's nervous system is constantly braced and constantly scanning for threat and responsibility and expectation, his attention gets pulled upward into the mind. And all his actions in his life becomes strategic decision-making that's mental, right? Life becomes a chess game. And choices become about what's required rather than what's true in your man's heart. And so over time, men stop asking the questions of, what do I want? What feels right to me? What feels aligned to me? And instead they ask, what's expected? What's responsible of me? And what will just keep things from falling apart? Those are the questions they end up answering. And those are the things that take them away from their body and away from their truth. This is not failure. This is adaptive intelligence. The problem is living this way indefinitely comes at a cost. Because when men lose access to their inner compass, resentment builds, motivation is fragile at best, passion fades, right? Relationships feel obligatory rather than alive and wanted and chosen. Life feels flat and heavy. A man that's disconnected from his inner truth becomes easier to misunderstand. He no longer knows how to access himself clearly enough to even share it. And this is one of the reasons why men can feel so frustrated in relationships. Women tend to ask them, what do you feel? What do you want? What do you need? And internally, the answer is often, I don't know. And it's not because I don't care. It's because I've been disconnected from myself for so long. And this is where shame creeps in. Over time, men start to believe something is wrong with them, that they're deficient or unexpressive or emotionally blocked. But what's actually needed isn't pressure, it's reconnection. Reconnection to the body, to sensation, to rhythm and regulation. When the nervous system settles, the inner compass can come back online. And when that inner compass comes back online, men can start to feel clear about their decisions, grounded in their decision making. They get more confident without being rigid. They're more present without being forced or forcing. And it's from that place that connection with others can be possible. It's the only way. Because in those moments, then they're finally inhabiting themselves again. And this is what we mean by restoring the original architecture of the masculine. because the masculine is not derived by obligation. It's guided by integrity, embodiment, and inner truth. So I invite you to pause here for a moment, whether you're a man or a woman listening to this. Bring one hand to your chest and the other hand to your belly. And take a nice deep inhale through your nose. Hold it at the moment at the top. And then exhale long and slow. And then say quietly to yourself, I don't need to brace right now. I don't need to perform. It's safe to be here. Deep breath in through the nose and hold it. And exhale slowly, letting all the air out, emptying the lungs. This is where repair begins, not in effort, but in safety. This is the work ahead. And it's good work. This is necessary work, not just for men or for women, but for relationships. Bigger than that, it's the restoration of balance in the world. The masculine and feminine energies were never meant to compete, and one was never meant to correct the other. They were meant to meet, regulated, embodied, and in relationship, so that life itself can move more freely. So, as we prepare to come to a close, I want to remind you of something important. Nothing that we've spoken about today means that anyone has failed. Not men, not women, not relationships, not marriages. What we've talked about today and what we've named are patterns. Nervous system patterns, survival patterns, relational patterns that make sense given what so many of us were taught and what our bodies have had to endure. And when we understand the system, we stop personalizing the symptoms. And when we stop personalizing the symptoms, real repair becomes possible. So this work is not about trying harder. It's about creating enough safety for truth, connection, and desire to return on their own. If something in this episode resonated with you, I invite you to sit with it gently. Let your body digest it in its own time. And know that reconnection doesn't happen through force. It happens through presence. And it may take time. I thank you for listening, for the willingness to learn and understand, and for being part of the work of restoring balance within ourselves, within our relationships, and within the world. And before we leave, I offer you a prayer. May men feel honored for the effort they have made with the capacity they have had. May your bodies remember safety. May presence replace pressure. May strength soften without disappearing. For women, may women feel clarity instead of confusion. May you feel compassion instead of blame. And may all relationships become a place of repair rather than rupture. And may we all remember what it feels like to come home to ourselves and to one another. And so it is. Until next time, tune in and tend to your body. It's much wiser than you think. Thank you all. Blessed be. Until next time, I'm Dr. Christy, and this is Rewilding Wellness. As always, I'd love to hear your feedback, your questions, your comments, your concerns. Email Christy at christyvanacore.com. Would love to connect. Be well.